Josh Mond's Untitled short film, screened here in Karlovy ends with the title "Thanks to my family and my extended family," and that's what we are mainly going to talk about today. What's the family? What's the extended family? How does it work? How the films are being produced, and so on. And subsequent themes are up to you also, because the debate will be open to your suggestions, questions, and so on, of course. So let's start with the family. How did you guys meet? Were you first collaborators and then friends, or first friends and then collaborators? How was it?
Well, Josh and I knew each other briefly in high school. He's a year older. But what happened was Josh, I went to NYU, and then Josh and Sean both transferred into NYU at the same time, and they met in a class that we have at NYU called Sight and Sound. Sight and Sound is a class where it's your first time in film school shooting on film and making short films, and you break up into groups of 4. And Sean and Josh met there and joined, and they got along right away and had the same sort of mentality and idea of what they wanted to do. And then we bumped into each other, or I bumped into Josh on the street downtown near school. And that's where I met Sean for the first time, and we all just knew that we all wanted to be filmmakers, and we knew that we just wanted to start making movies right away, and immediately started working together. Essentially, really, just kind of immediately started working on a project that we had at the time, which was would have been our first feature film, and Josh had a script that he had co-written with somebody else, and I started co-writing with Josh on the script, and Sean and he started working to try and raise money and put together a crew, and that's kind of where it all started. I could keep going, or I'll end up talking about the last 10 years.
Yeah. So related to the question, that we started working together the day that we met, and our friendship grew with that. I think if we just tried to make a company with old friends who were friends for years first, it would have been very difficult, but we became friends through our work. Yeah.
That was kind of a warning not to speak. I think it's like there's a cool analogy for it, because maybe it only translates in New York, but it's like you never move into an apartment with an old friend. You never have a roommate as an old friend. You know what I mean? If I lived with Alex, it'd be terrible. But we kind of did everything on the same day and consciously. It was a conscious effort to make this relationship work, because it was so important subconsciously for us to be filmmakers, to actively every day be like, this is all we think about. And to us, I didn't think that felt real until maybe, like, for me at least, till about a year ago, that we were actually filmmakers. You know what I mean? So when we all met, just from my experience, I think we all had the same drive, and we worked hard from that motivation of doing this, and also enjoying each other's company to really try and make it work. And it was a lot of communication. it's like the best relationship you ever had with a girlfriend, It's like you did a really good job, you know what I mean? And you really were you trusted your instincts, and you were caring, and you were receptive to hearing things about yourself, that were true, so that you can further the relationship. To be really honest with you guys, I remember walking down the street in a place called St. Mark's Place in New York City, and I guess if you call it the East Village, and we were just talking, and I think Tony or Sean told me within the first week of knowing each other that they didn't like the way that I spoke to them, that it sounded like I was belittling the way I talked was like talking down to them. And I wasn't aware of that. And after that, I hope I corrected it. Sometimes. But the point is that, you know, I think you're open to hear things about yourself that, you know, so it doesn't get in the way of the work or your friendships. That's it.
Yeah.
And you all say that studying film school makes sense, that it's worth doing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you...
Okay.
No, see, it's bullshit. Because it's bullshit because if you don't... there's no formula to how you start making movies or what movies you make or what your career turns into. You can't look at people's filmographies and go, oh, I'm going to do this kind of movie, then I'm going to do this kind of movie, and then, you know, this will happen. Or that, you know, I'm going to go to this place or this place. It's just sort of, you have to be open to the possibility and continue on your path of what you want to do. Film school for us was crucial. I mean, I didn't finish film school. Neither Josh really kind of finished it.
That's not
Sean
true. I walked
it.
on stage.
But what we did spend, I mean, we were there for a few years at least, and what happened was you have all these resources. This is a place where you can make a bunch of mistakes, and you're being given all this equipment, and you have access to all the movies you want to see in the library, and you have teachers there. Some of them are not good, and then a few of them are great, maybe a couple of them, but that's all you need. And you're surrounded by people that want to do what you do. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that want to do what you do that are unpleasant or you just don't want to spend too much time with. But then you find a handful of people that you do like, and you end up working with them. And we still work with the people that we met in film school, you know, besides the three of us, you know. And I think that the way that we did it, which was very much something that Josh was conscious of as we were doing it, which was as every short film, we'd see, you know, okay, this person on the crew was great. Everybody got along. He fits in it. This person's really talented, but we don't get along with him, or he doesn't see the things that we see. So, you know, and then the next time that person wouldn't be on set, but the other person would be. And that's sort of how the crews were built in that very safe environment of film school sets.
And they continue to be built like that.
Yeah, and it keeps going. But that, I think that groundwork was all set up in film school. And even our structure is something that comes out of a film school mentality. I mean, Sight and Sound, you're 4 people, and one day you're directing.
Tell them what Sight and Sound is.
Oh, I did. It's the class I talked about before. Sight and Sound, you one day you're directing, the other day you're assistant cameraman, third day you're a cameraman. You know, you're doing, you know, so you're switching. So you get used to the idea that you're not always going to be the one in the director's chair.
Several of your collaborators are with you here at the festival, and some of them we will also involve in the debate later at some point, if they would like to. What was the role of New York University in, let's say, establishing some canon or some idols of you share?
Oh, I remember Sean and I were in Sight and Sound together, and it was a very important class. I remember, Sean, what was the movie we saw in class where the 2 kids were, the little girl was in the back of a truck? I can't remember. Oh, I remember seeing films from a professor that we were both like, oh, I've never seen that before, and extremely intrigued by it. Isn't that where you found out about Hanukkah?
Yeah, like so.
That's where I found out about it.
One of my first. So I don't think, is this working? One of my first teachers there, our first teacher there, she showed a clip from Funny Games, and I had never seen anything like it. And so I went out and I watched it, and then I followed it up by watching Code Unknown, and then every other film from there, and it was sort of mind-blowing. And then, you know, I'd go to the library at NYU and watch them, and then, you know, one day I showed Antonio Code Unknown, and I think that was the first time we had watched it together. And then it's funny, this thing, you know, I spent this week watching all of our films, and for the first time in a long time, and there's clearly overlap between us, but there's also very clear differences, and it's fun to watch. And it's not only that we work together and influence each other, but we share influences. And you know, we'll have it's very funny. It's like we'll have crossovers where we love somebody, and then Antonio will really love somebody, and I'll only just kind of like them, and then Josh will really love somebody, and I'll kind of like them, and then they'll share someone they really love, and so it's like this cross. There's certain people that cross over, and it's really interesting how it highlights our differences, but because we also work together, we inspire each other and push each other. You know, I shot Antonio's shorts, and I thought I was going to be a cinematographer. And I don't know if any of you got to see By It Now, but the second scene, which is in the hotel room, the day we shot that was the day I realized that I wanted to direct. And that the things I thought I wanted to do through cinematography were actually things I wanted to do as a director. I just didn't know that's what a director did.
Right. Because I remember those things watching By Now again, and they were things that you wanted to do that were much more about character and story reveals. Like, well, because you weren't thinking light. Like when we would talk about camera, we'd always be talking about camera as composition for story, you know. Like I remember the key shot in By It Now, which is one of my favorite shots. That I clearly remember was a conversation between you and me where you had this idea, and you were like, I think when she gets up and she goes to the door, that when we follow her, we get to the door, and then there's when he knocks, when she opens the door, you don't see him. And it was something that was like, we're gonna get there. We're gonna hold on this conversation from behind her head, and we're not gonna see him until he comes in. Yeah. And that was cinematography, but that was storytelling, you know. Yeah. And that was also about holding back. And that was, I think, something that was really key in your storytelling and what you were, what you were giving to me when we were working together.
Yeah, and then to go further, it's there's always this feeling of when you make something, I think what we've done is when we've set out to make something, we've set out to make something that we really believe in, and we haven't thought about anything beyond that. Like, we just want to make that film, and we get it made for as little as we can without affecting the quality. But when you're done with something and you look, when you just finish something, you're like, okay, this is the best it can be. This is, we're really proud of it. Every time we finish something, we continue to work on it until we all say, this is the best it can be. This is great. And then, someone else is always working on something else. So I remember finishing the edit for Martha in December, and Josh and Tony had just got back from Paris where they shot Simon Killer. And I remember thinking, like, really being happy with Martha, and then watching the Simon dailies and just going, shit, like, that's amazing. Like, you shot that scene like that? Where'd you think of that? So then when I went to shoot, I just did a mini-series in England, and I went to shoot my mini-series in England, and a lot of it is influenced by things Tony was doing in Simon. Really simple camera movements, pans, like just the way, like certain things that he hadn't done before. He had changed his style from After School to Simon, and then, where After School at that time, we had been influenced by similar things, and then he went and then did something different, which has now come back and influenced me in my show. And then he always says that there's things in my show, like you say about the long takes, that are influencing him. And
I thought that, yeah. I remember then I saw Southcliffe, and I was like, "Fuck, Sean got those long takes." You just went, and you nailed the long takes so well. and it's so funny because I didn't notice the Simon stuff, but yeah, I think it's just like, you know, there's such it's just a process that we're all going through. You know, it's always we're always trying to get better, and with, unfortunately, you can only make so many films, you know, and so but because they take so much time, you really can, I don't know, you grow in between the films, and you get inspired in between the films, and then
and you change as you grow.
And you change and you grow.
Older, every year.
What's really amazing is that, is this on? Yeah. What's really amazing is that, you know, I've starting out and like building this safe world, you know, between the three of us, has allowed us to be more vulnerable to grow much more. And so for me, I'm looking at all the work here, and I've looked at all the work that we've done together, and the thing I just made that I showed here, and my script that I'm writing, and I'm working with two people that are like, you know, that are my inspiration, that I'm stealing from. You know, not stealing from, but I see Tony's stuff written in my scripts, like where the camera is, and I see Sean, I hear Sean in the back of my head when I'm writing. You know, it's basically like Borderline Films, you know, it actually means we're crazy because I basically just have them in my head, you know, and I'm very lucky to have them in my head. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's basically like, and even doing Two Gates of Sleep, which is the only movie we did outside of the company. I mean, I didn't want to do. I had a philosophy that the movies that we do, I would only do as a producer and give myself to if there's something I wanted to learn from, like something I was excited about. And each of the films that we've done, I've definitely incorporated into my own style. And I think that's really important, is to like you always have to be, I guess, excited by somebody in order to give them everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I was going to say about this, just sort of what I realized in talking about all this, is that essentially, and I think we may have said this before in the past, but what we've constructed was more of like a continuation of film school. That that essentially what we're doing is we're still in film school together, you know, but like, you know, so I'm with two guys that I really respect who are doing really cool stuff, and I can actually ask them how they're doing it or why they're doing it, and I can also go to one of these two guys, and it's important for me on a film set to have someone that I can talk to honestly at the end of the day. At the end of the day, when you're feeling the most vulnerable and you're feeling like you've had to, you know, as a director, I think it's important to say you don't know if you don't know something, but you have to be in charge, and you have to be moving forward, and you have to be confident. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just want to go to your friend and go, I don't know what the fuck just happened. Like, I don't know what I did there. Like, you kind of want to cry, or you want to, and you need to feel safe with that person, and you need that person to say honestly to you, well, no, you're good. Like, you watch the footage back and you go, no, it's great. You don't know what you're talking about, because you really don't know all the time. Yeah. But if you're not doing it right, or if they have an idea, then they can push you. And
you did that for me on the short. It was like, you know, you were very like careful with me, and like going, you know, you give me an idea and you thought I would be upset because I didn't take it. You know, and you'd be like, I'm just letting you know, like, you know, you can do whatever you want, it's your choice. And the 2 times you actually did it, you made the short 10 times better. It was like, there was the one time where the levitation, when he comes down, and I wanted to do the images on his feet as he comes down. And you were like, you know, not to be so, I'm not going to say what you said exactly, but basically you're just like, slow it down. Like, you're going to come back, you want to reveal that later. And then also you need a transition for the lighting. I mean, but basically, like, in front of some people I didn't know, it was the first time I was working with them on a very abstract thing that was pretty big. You know, I could take the time to hear somebody saying, think about it differently. As we're like a year before that, I probably could have done the same thing, but it would have been a lot harder to like check my ego at the door, you know. And I think a lot of the time we remind each other you know, to trust each other, not to have ego in the situation, because that's only going to hurt the film.
I want to say something related to this and related to film school, is that in film school, I think people are made to think, at least when we were in school, you're sort of made to think that, you know, the director, the writer-director is this individual who is going to make and control a movie all on his or her own. And there were a lot of talented people in school. And then of that talented group, there were ones who sort of understood business and understood how to make a career of it. But you know, the one thing, I feel very fortunate. I don't know how we felt this or knew this, but we just knew. We looked around and we said, okay, like we're not going to do this on our own. You know, you're just because you're a director and that's a, you know, traditionally a very singular position. It's actually. It's not. It's you know, the way we set up the company is that we wanted to create a forum for each of us to direct the films we want to direct. But in that, you know, we have this situation where we can learn from each other, support each other. And, you know, when we weren't ready to direct, when I wasn't ready to direct, I had only done a couple things in school. Then, you know, I was writing my first script. I'd never written a feature before. And I was able to, you know, produce Antonio's feature during that time and learn from him and work on music videos and things and learn. And so I think it's really important to break that idea that a director is this all-knowing position, because it's not. I mean, I go into everything and I always say, it's not, I know what I don't want. I know what I don't want it to be, and I start there. And basically what I'm doing from there is just trusting my instincts. And sometimes beyond that, well, you constantly beyond that need a bounce board. So you surround yourself with talented people who you trust, and you hire them if it's a crew or actor, or if it's, you know, you hire them because you believe in them. And so I believe a director gives a forum to those talented people around them, and then your job is to bring the best out of those people. It's not to know every situation and say, this is what you do, this is how you do it. Not at all. It's to say, well, I know I don't, well, for me, it's, I know I don't want it to be this, so let's find something where we know I want it to be. And sometimes it's just about doing it until you see it, and then you know. And I think that what we've done has allowed for that, because it's it hasn't, we have never been forced to jump in fully. We've been able to watch and learn and
just saying that, like, the NYU allowed us to meet people that were like-minded, you know, so that we could continue to create like this, like, so it went beyond us, you know, like, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, a friend of ours who's here, who's worked with us before, and then he went on to produce his own movies, and I think he's an amazing guy. I think he's super smart, and just a really special dude, and he, you know, just talking about producing and satisfaction of it. And I said to him, I said, producing's only a way into being a filmmaker. Like, you know, if you have a natural skill to do something in the film industry, it'll get you into a place to meet people that are like-minded, that wants to talk about what you want to talk about and share ideas. And then when you're ready, then you direct. And I said to him, like, you have to be confident that you have to look at the end game of being a producer. It's not a happy, for most people, the way that, for me and this person specifically, it's not something that you want to do for the rest of your life, because it's not as rewarding. And
But that's you guys. That's not.
My point about the whole thing is that
not all producers feel that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But like, my point about the whole thing is that don't rush it. But by just pushing yourself out there into an environment where people are creating, do whatever you can to get there so that you can start meeting people. I mean, I didn't meet anybody I really liked until I was 20, because I went to college and I was able to talk about films all day and things that I loved, and that allowed me to really connect with people. And so the story I brought about my friend is basically, you know, he's been doing it for a while, and we had a long conversation, and I said, man, you know, you did this to get here to make movies. Don't forget that. And I don't know, I just think that's a great entryway for most people, just to get in there to meet people and figure your voice out and figure out what you want to say. And that's kind of what I, you know, did with them, is that I didn't, like, Tony's been directing since he was born. You know, his mom, like, Kubrick things over the crib. It's true. So
no, it's not.
That is true.
Not
so,
true
but the you know, the point in my natural instincts was as a producer. You know, the way that I grew up and how I was mentored, that was a skill set that I had. But we traded, you know, we traded skills, and we went to what was most comfortable. And Sean shot all my stuff in the beginning. I have to tell this one story. My dad and my mother, we have a showcase at NYU after your Fight and Sight and Sound class. And my mother and my dad came to the screening, and my short film was selected to play, and Tony's was as well. And mine was like the day in the life of a quarter from the perspective of a quarter. It's really good. And Tony's came up second, after, I think right after mine. And I looked at my mom and I said, this is the guy I want to dedicate my life to. And my mom's like, cool. And I said to my dad, he's like, all right, we watched the short film. And I let Antonio explain the film, but I looked to my left, and my dad's just like, you idiot. And then my mom's like, I like him, you know. And that's when I had to figure out, you know, like I remember walking down the street and saying to Antonio, like, I believe in you so much. This is the moment. Remember this moment. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Late at night, walking up Union Square,
yeah.
And I just said to him, I said, I'm going to devote my life to you. I believe in you. And I do. I think both of them are geniuses. I really do. I went to film school. I remember to understand, like, why you move a camera a certain way, like putting adjectives to shots. And I kind of, I haven't figured out any of that yet, but like at least I started the road from film school and it was through Wong Kar-wai. But I watch Antonio direct, and every shot in a movie has so much purpose, and it's so clever, and it's not just being clever for the sake of being clever, it's related to the text. And so I just, you know, I watch both of them with admiration. I don't know, I don't know if it wraps up or something, but I'm trying to make sense of something.
I would also say just, you know, to Josh's point about getting into film, for two examples right now, the guy who is a friend of ours from film school who did sound recording on every one of our films is also one of the most brilliant writers that we know. And he has a feature here that he wrote, and his name's Michael Bloomberg, and Alex Engel, who is the gaffer on all the films that we made, and also a friend from film school, is a brilliant writer and filmmaker, and he's making films. And the guy who shot Simon Killer and shot Josh's short and shoots a bunch of stuff, and he is shooting his short. And so it's like, and Brady is an actor, but he's also a brilliant filmmaker, and his short film was at Sundance, and that's when I first met Brady, or first got to know Brady, was through Sundance in 2010. Yeah, and Maddie Diop, the actress. I mean, it's just everybody. You know, what I was saying was that you can. It's not just producing as a way in. If you're ambitious enough and committed enough to what you want to do, if you're recording sound on a film set, you're surrounded by crew all the time, and you're surrounded by producers and filmmakers and actors, and it's a matter of being surrounded by good people in whatever position you are, and if in whatever position you are is not where you want to be, you stay committed to the idea that you're going to get there, and you keep working. Because the saddest thing on a film set is when you go on a film set and someone is doing something and they've been doing it because they were good at it. Like they were good at it, they could make money doing it, and they always said, you know what, I'm going to do this until I can get enough money to make my short film, or I'm going to do this until I finish my script. But, you know, they allowed the job to take over and kept putting things aside. But these guys, you know, the sound recordist and even Brady, and Brady at this point is taking a break from acting so that he can go make his first feature, and he will make his first feature, and so will all the people I talked about. So it's a matter of being committed to the idea that you want to be a filmmaker, whatever way it is.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember which one of you said it, but it was like basically saying we sort of continued film school after film school, and that's so important. Again, I don't know how it is here, but at home, it was this false idea that, okay, you're going to make your thesis film and you're going to go out and, you know, you're going to try and sell a script in Hollywood and all that crap. And basically, you're like, as you know, I'm six or 7 years out of film school, and every time I make a film, I'm learning something. Every time I produce a film or, you know, work with them on their stuff, I'm learning something. So you never stop learning. And so this idea that, okay, you're out of school and it's some sort of finish line and then life begins, it's not true. It's like you have to continue to learn and grow, and you know, which is what we're saying about everyone we work with is doing, and now things are coming to fruition. But for me, one of the most valuable things was that when we got out of school, we knew we wanted to. We were developing Antonio's first feature. He was going to shoot his film first. We were Josh was getting some music video work. So, but the bulk of our income came because Susan Shopmaker, our casting director, gave us jobs at her office. And so for 4 or 5 years, we were helping her run sessions, doing movies and commercials, and in that time, every actor in New York passes through that room. And so, you know, I was just out of school and getting to spend, she'd leave me in the room alone all day, you know, and see, you know, actors and just get comfortable talking to them. And that, you know, my focus when I got into film was about the visual. I thought I wanted to be a cinematographer. I had studied photography a little bit, and to me that was the most important thing until I worked on Buy It Now. I saw Chris McCann, I saw Rosemary DeWitt, and that was the first time I'd ever seen real actors in person, and I was so inspired. And then I just knew it was about the acting, and then spending all the time in casting, I just fell in love with actors and watching them. And to me, it's almost the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that really matters. If the performance isn't good, nothing else matters. You can make the most beautiful movie in the world, but if there's no performance, it's nothing. And so for me, that's just the focus. But I learned that through years of being a casting assistant before I started directing.
What's the importance of Sundance Labs for you? You were involved in Sundance Lab for screenwriting, for directing, also for DOPs. So how do you see the role of Sundance Labs?
Sundance was very important for me. They also supported Josh as a producer, and Antonio had a similar experience with Cannes. So we were very lucky to have, with our first features, I mean, for me, the Sundance Lab was sort of a turning point in my life. I didn't really have, I thought I was writing a script so that I'd have something to direct, and I didn't really have any confidence as a writer. And then when I got into the lab, I still didn't really, and then I went through the lab, and it's this very difficult process, and you come out, it's not so much about, basically the thing is you go there and they ask you questions about what do you want, like what, you know, it's sort of this search of what you're trying to tell and what you want, and from filmmaking, and it's sort of a soul searching exercise, and it just makes you dig deeper, and it teaches you how to dig deeper and continually dig and learn. I think that's the key, is that it's showing you that this learning process will always continue. And obviously when something like that happens, likewise when Antonio did the Cannes residence, you know, it's a wonderful experience as a filmmaker, but then in terms of taking the next step and making the film, investors pay attention. And so it's slightly easier to get people to believe in the project because it, you know, validates your project in some way. So it's, you know, it was just a wonderful process, and then going to the festival, and I think that Sundance is the best place for young American filmmakers to debut. I think it's the place where there's a real venue for that, you know, first, second-time filmmakers to really be featured, American filmmakers.
So, how are your films financed? And is it easier now in the end of the first decade to finance the film for you?
I mean, I don't. Financing is one of the hardest parts on the producing side, because we're making independent films in America, and the subject matter of all our stuff is pretty intense or pretty difficult and for some people to imagine, and it's a high risk investment. In the contracts with investors, you have to state legally that it is a high risk investment, meaning that it's not likely you're going to get your money back. So it's hard to find people that are willing to basically encourage the arts. And luckily for us, a lot of the investors that we've had have been people who've wanted to learn like we are. So in the beginning, a lot of our films were financed just like any door we can knock on. I mean, we didn't know any of these people until we didn't know anybody with money. We kind of just met them while we were trying to find it. And it turned out that our system was people that were giving us money were young, and they used like after school as a learning, like as a place to learn filmmaking, like how to learn to make mistakes. And so it was kind of their own film school, and they've all gone on to be successful producers. They've all made their own movies. It's quite inspiring. Like one of the producers on the film is now after school, just went through the Sundance lab after having 2 short films at Sundance, and he's gonna make his movie, I think, in September, and then another one had a movie at Cannes this year, and you know, and it's really nice to see everybody kind of continue their film school, and their film school kind of started on after school. In terms of other money, just to finish real quickly, I mean, it's always different how it comes in. You know, can't make it the same every time, and you know, you're lucky to have money to make your film, but that money's never easy.
Yeah, I think it's really the hardest part, and the one thing we do, the one thing we've done so far is we've just basically said, what is the littlest budget we can make it for without compromising the film. And so we've made these films for tiny budgets, and we've also, you know, we also know that we're making a choice to make them that way because we want to have the control over them. We could take money from people who say, oh, they need approval over cast, or, you know, they want input on the edit, and we've said no to people like that because we are looking for partners who believe in us, and as investors, we're looking for people who want to go on the ride with us. And like Josh said, it's been this wonderful thing where, you know, we didn't know people with money, but then we met kids who wanted to be producers who did know people with money, and so they would raise money and then be associate producers, and then on the next film they move up to co-producer, and you know, and then we would help them and teach them how to produce, and they did the thing we couldn't do at the time, which was bring in money, but it's never just about bringing in money. It's like with those people we really help them develop what they want to do as well. And so it's this wonderful system that's in place of, you know, continuing to support people who want to do what we do.
Tony and I recently went up to the Martha farm, the farm from Martha, which is Antonio's grandfather's farm, and we went up there to finish my script or to continue working on it and work on his script for about a month, where there's no cell phone service, no internet, and just focus on two things. And we like go to our separate areas, we write, and then we like come back, you know. But we had somebody with us who is this kid named David, who's not really a kid. He showed up at our office one day, he snuck into the building, and he had a typed letter. Kind of scary, but then read the letter, and it was so eloquent. And I like that when someone, like, I used to sneak into buildings and like give him my DVDs, like past security and stuff, and that's how we got jobs. And I respected it. And then I find this guy David started working for me when I did the short, and he was, I mean, I couldn't have made it without him. Like his help and helping me figure out how to like articulate things and prepare my stuff for the shoot was so helpful. So in turn, when we were going upstate to write, which is a couple hours outside New York City, basically he agreed to come with us. And this guy had been working jobs for years, and he just like, I can't do this stuff anymore, it's making me unhappy. I'm gonna take my unemployment and I'm gonna go try and work for these guys. And that's what he did. So he came upstate with us, he worked on his short film, and while he was helping Antonio and I, we were helping him develop his short. And he was so gracious and so kind that at the end of the trip, from the three of us, we gave him a modest amount of money to go make his short. And then we made some phone calls to get him really strong actors. And so my point is that, you know, it's important to keep this going. And I think through the years, I think the idea was always there. I always loved to like keep going and help people and do it together. But I think through the years, you start to realize who really deserves that attention and that time, and the relationships that you've established. And I think for me at least, that's been a very strong, very hard process. And I think only recently, you know, and from our relationship and their morals and their minds, I'm able to finally like fully, I think, hopefully, perfect my filters of people to welcome into the world. Because for me, I'm very protective of this world, because I've cherished it so much that I don't want anything to get in the way of it. But if I'm always on my guard, then it won't keep going. So I think the one thing is like, when, you know, you guys go out there and if you want to make movies and somebody helps you, make sure you remember to do the same for somebody else. Because it's like, I don't know why filmmaking, at least in our country, is such like this one-man show, like this, and like the big movies, like all these personas, and I did it myself, because it's so lonely to do it like that. It's like, why would you want to get success or whatever and be isolated, you know? Movies are about connecting with people, you know? So I think it's kind of the antithesis, and I think where we are now and being in your country has been awesome, because people have been going to the cinema to see movies. They don't know the directors for the most part. They sit on the ground, like they just want to see movies. And I think it's a really pure way of being introduced to films. There's no pretense. And I respect what you guys have here, and I think you guys have an opportunity to really create some really amazing work, and I know some amazing stuff's come out of here. So I just the one thing I'd like people to walk away with is just remember to, if you have a little bit, give back, in the sense of like, keep helping people, don't stop, you know, because that'll keep coming back to you.
After Martha, Mercy May, Marilyn was finished, you were approached by Fox Searchlight what changed? What's the deal? How does it work with Fox Searchlight?
So part of Fox. So we made Martha on our own for a very small budget, and then we were fortunate enough to have Fox Searchlight buy it and distribute it. And as a part of that, for a long time, we said we're 3 directors, and we're all going to direct and write. And when After School was made, everyone was like, yeah, okay, boys. Like Antonio's a director, you guys are producers. And then when we had the script for Martha, Ted Hope read it because he loved After School. And he always says he was skeptical at first, and then he read it, and he was like, oh, okay, maybe you guys actually are. And then when Fox bought Martha, they, we've had support all the way through from lots of people, but, they were the first big company to say, oh, actually, we do believe this system. We do believe these guys are all writers and directors. And so they gave us a first look deal, which is basically if we have ideas, we take it to them first. And we're developing a bunch of projects with them now, and they help us. They help with our office in New York, and that's really the deal.
Yeah, and they also understand. There's an understanding there because of the fact that the way the deal works is if they don't like the project, or they feel like it's not right for them, then they let the project go, and then we have the right to do whatever we want with it. So so we're never going to get into a situation where we're doing a film that is where we're not on the same page. Like there's films that fundamentally don't work for them, and those films we can do the way that we've done them before, or take them and find new ways to do them. But the films where they see, oh, this is something that works for Fox Searchlight, then we're starting off on the same page. Like there's no pressure to make a film where both sides aren't 100% committed to the idea. So it's a very nice deal to have.
One of the best things about it is that it's the first time we've ever had an office. I think where we got to work together. I think we all were working from our homes, which is quite difficult. You don't get as much work done when you're all apart. So when did we get we got the office a year ago, and it's crazy to think that we were always working from our homes, or wherever we were, or from Susan's. We had Susan. We made a deal. She gave us a desk in this office in prime real estate in New York City, and we got to have mail sent there, and we also got to learn, obviously, by seeing how the business works from her perspective, and it was extremely educational and inspiring. But we definitely still have mail that goes there. Tax things. Yeah. Sean's really give that to Sean. So I don't know. It's been the Fox Searchlight deal has been really cool because we're able to be together and work. So we get much more done. It feels more rewarding, but it's interesting. It's that we had to do 9 years of just figuring out wherever we could work from, and obviously without Susan, and other people in our lives, we wouldn't have had the things to allow us to continue. Like you need mail to go somewhere, and if you can't afford an apartment, it's like you have to have it. So basically, it's like I don't know. It's the help from others, and the Fox Searchlight deal really allowed us to receive mail.
Just thinking of Fox Searchlight deal and just putting things in perspective. I mean, my first job in film was as an intern when I was 14, and that was to clean up the boss's dog's shit. That was my first job in a film company, was at the shooting gallery 15 years ago and Shooting Gallery made films like Sling Blade and Laws of Gravity, and like early 90s cool indie movies, and then they eventually went under. But I interned there. I interned at other companies, and you know, just thinking now of sort of putting things in perspective. You know, 15 years ago, I walked into an office going, what can I do to help here? And he said, oh, well, I have these 2 huge dogs that walk around all day and they shit everywhere outside. Could you clean up the dog shit and then come back and we have some scripts for you to photocopy? You know, so, you know, you just putting things in perspective. And because of that, because of the experience of having to intern, and I think we've all done it in some way, we all had to come up in doing jobs that we didn't want to do. The secret for all those sort of initial jobs of where you're going to be around people that make movies for the first time was always that there was no job that I couldn't do. There was no job that was beneath me. As long as it didn't involve hurting anybody or anything, you know, there was no job that was beneath me, and there was nothing that I could ask them. Like, I could ask them for work. I could say, do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? Can I get, like, do you want me to do this or that? And if they said whatever, then that was it. But if they said, oh, you know, we need you to go and deliver a package, I would never say, oh, well, you know, I was thinking more like, you know, reading a script. I would just say, okay. And then it's all about, I think in the beginning of your career or the beginning of those jobs, it's all about commitment and people seeing that you're committed and that you're reliable.
You hit it on the head. Like, I just remembered, like, learning how to be a PA. Or I had a mentor that I worked for years, my teens, and I remember one thing that I learned, because you just triggered it and you just kind of said it, which is like, if you have nothing to do, you should never have nothing to do on set. And like, you always, like, you want to be helpful, so you just ask, like, if you don't have anything to do, go and ask somebody, you know, what can I do? Is there anything that you need? And you just keep moving and asking people until you find something to do. And then people notice that, and then you yourself start thinking like that, where you're constantly doing whatever you can to keep it moving. And I think he's right. I think there's a huge thing about, and at least in America, at NYU, and I definitely experience it, and I've seen it in them in some capacity, but mostly in other people in film sets through the years, is that, you know, people get really disappointed when they show up on set, and they're like, I don't want to get coffee, or I don't want to lock down this street. Like, why do I have to lock? And it's like, well, you know, like, just do it. Like, you know, there should be no ego. You're part of the team. And I don't know. I just remember that one little soundbite or from making movies in the beginning, where it's like, I was told by my mentor, like, pulled me aside and like explained to me how to be on set. Yeah. And he like told me a story, which is really dramatic, but it's like how he didn't get somebody a coffee with sugar in it and they threw the coffee, you know, that those crazy stories from set that I've never seen happen. Yeah. But I think those stories are implanted so that something like that never happens.
Yeah. I didn't know how to make coffee when I first started interning. I mean, I learned some pretty important things. Even when you think about like photocopying scripts, that's like the first time that I really saw a bunch of scripts, and in the act of photocopying scripts, I would always read a little bit. I remember even doing stuff on set, like locking down things. One of my first jobs on set, I was at Shooting Gallery for You Can Count on Me. I was an intern on You Can Count on Me, and we were shooting the last couple days, and they were there was a bunch of kids playing music across the street while they're filming these scenes in the bank with Matthew Broderick and Laura Linney, and they were like, go across the street and get these kids to stop playing music and promise them autographs from Matthew Broderick. So I'd have to go. I went across the street, and that's the also. It's like it puts you out there. It makes you, because as a filmmaker, you're putting yourself out there, and you have to ask people to do certain things that you don't want to ask them to do.
Did you get them to shut the music
off?
And
they were quiet. They came over and they had drinks and or you know, we gave them free food from craft services, and then they met Matthew Broderick, and then I remember that set a tone, and then the next day I played wiffle ball with Matthew Broderick, who was very impressed by my the way I ran. He thought I was. He hit a ball and it went, and I remember Matthew Broderick going, "Look at that kid run," and I was like, "That's fun." But I remember being those early days on set, and also the other thing about being on set is being around actors and not being intimidated by that process, and being around actors that are actors you've seen in other things, and being comfortable with that, because sometimes that makes people sort of feel weird, or they don't know how to process, to sort of separate this person that they've been idolizing or been a fan of, and then the reality of it, and working with them and communicating on a regular level.
You had, when we were doing after school, and stop me if this is, you don't want me to say anything, but when we were doing after school, I remembered a day where you were just really sensitive, and you were thinking about the crew and what were they thinking, and you know, like you were like the guinea pig for us in a lot of ways, where you went out there with a bunch of people we didn't know that well to make your movie that was different, and it's just interesting because I remember just watching you go through your own self, like, you know, it's like your first day at high school, you know, and it was interesting because you got to bear that burden. But why I bring this up is because I thought it might be interesting to hear, if you don't mind, like what those feelings were that you had, so that it's like normal to feel that way on a movie set. Like nothing's wrong. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you weren't a filmmaker. You're not a filmmaker if you feel that. You're even more of a filmmaker if you feel insecure and you don't know what to do and you're nervous about what other people are thinking. I mean, you got to get past that. But that moment in time doesn't mean you're not a filmmaker. And because I learned that from watching him.
Is
that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that I think it's a pretty common thing as a young filmmaker to feel this insecurity and pressure and feel like everyone is trying to take over your thing. Like it's normal to feel this kind of insecurity because you can't differentiate between someone giving their opinion and someone trying to, you know, railroad you. It's like that's the extreme of it. Someone's just saying, you know what, I don't know if that was the best way that could have been, or that looked strange or whatever. And you're in your young filmmaker head, you're thinking, this guy's trying to fuck me. This guy is trying to fuck me. This guy wants to take over. And you have to sort of remind yourself constantly that as a director, the most wonderful thing about being a director is, and the worst thing about being a director is that if you take someone's suggestion and it's good, then you get the credit for it. And if you take someone's suggestion and it's bad, then you get the blame for it. So you have to take that responsibility, and you have to know what you want to do, and know when other people say something, if it fits within your idea or your vision. And if it doesn't, there's a very polite way of saying, no, you know, I don't agree with that. And you don't ever have to explain yourself, or you don't have to. You can. But I think it's for me it was an important process, because to be able to make the film, really I had to get past myself and all the insecurity that came with not just being a filmmaker, but being human. And making a film is putting yourself in a very vulnerable position. And but if you embrace it and you realize that you're surrounded by people that trust, that want to be there. Hopefully, they want to be there. That everybody's interested in trying to make the best film possible. Sometimes they're thinking about a different film than you are, and hopefully, a lot of the time you intersect.
Yeah, I think the way I dealt with it was that I just, you know, it is hard at first to know when to trust yourself. And so I just remember editing the first short film I ever made, and someone giving notes. And I just remember having a feeling instantly. It just was like yes or no. I felt it in my gut. And so I started listening to when I agreed and when I didn't agree. And I sort of never looked back. And I think that's the key, is that when you're making a film and you're directing, you're putting, you know, like I'm in life. I can be very indecisive. Like I can going out to dinner. Bye, Susan. Going out to dinner, I can be indecisive about what I'm going to order. But when I'm on set, I can make a decision and never look back. And it's not always the right decision, but it's a decision, and you have to make it. And so, I think that's the key: is learning to trust yourself. Filmmaking is instinctual. It's not intellectual. It's emotional. It's very basic in a lot of ways. It's capturing human beings being together. You know, it's those things. People don't know why they do the things they do, and as a filmmaker, you don't always need to know why. I don't like to intellectualize or articulate why I like to do the things I do. I just say it feels right, and I trust that. And once you and your instincts are in tune, it's a beautiful thing. And it's when you start second-guessing yourself that you lose that focus. And I just wanted to tie this back into the internship thing. For me, the most valuable thing about being an intern, I was 19, I had my first internship at a distribution company, and I worked there for about 6 weeks. And I remember watching the films they were making, or they were going to put out, reading scripts they were interested in, listening to their conversations. And I picked up, I was 19 and knew nothing, but I remember hearing them say things or hearing their opinions to films and just saying, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Like knowing, and I learned so much more from their mistakes than I did from anything good they could show. And so I think that's really key, is if you have a terrible experience at something, at an internship, or it's just an awful thing, you can always learn what not to do and how you would never do it or how you would do something different. That to me is more valuable than learning what to do, because there's never a right way to do something. But if you trust your gut, you know what not to do.
But also, just to go to that point, is if you're an intern and you're hearing a bunch of people say things that you know you disagree with, you don't have to ever say that out loud.
Yeah.
You don't speak up.
No, you don't ever say, because that's the biggest. It's like if you're sitting and you said, you know, you tell an intern, you say, you know what, because that always happens where they're like, someone's like, I like this kid, let him sit in on this meeting, and then that person thinks, oh, you know, they want my opinion on this situation. They don't want your opinion on the situation. They're just being polite and letting you sort of be see that process. But that's an important thing to know, is that at some point you don't, and like I've done this, I did something on a TV show. I shadowed a director on a television show, and I had to go through the process of sitting behind a monitor after having directed films, having to sit again behind a monitor and not express my opinion, because I knew it was not the polite thing to do, because as a director, you're already hearing so many opinions. To have one more person in your ear go, hey, you know what? I know I'm 20 years old, but I think this is the best way to do it, is just distracting.
And when I shadowed on a TV show, I got to ask Tony what not to do, you know, which was kind of cool. But it's the same. It is really challenging, because you take all the skills that you learned as an intern and how a set works and the environment, and you start applying them to your, you know, I was 27 when I did it, and it was challenging, like, to be on somebody else's set, sitting in a studio in pitch black behind a bunch of strangers, and like just watching them create and not having any input in it, and restraining yourself from your ideas, like Sean said about, you know, an internship and saying they're doing it wrong. I mean, I don't think they were doing it wrong. I love the TV show, but there were things I wanted to say because I wanted to do it differently. And you just have to know it's not even just an intern, just at certain times, whether you're the producer or the director, I think it goes back to, like you're talking about instincts, and I say the word intuition, which is the same thing, but intuition, you have to, your intuition is who you are. Yeah. Like, that's everything. And so it's really interesting, because you get to have a good experience on something like a TV show, because he already went through it and he told me this is what's appropriate, this is what's not appropriate, and then so I get a better experience learning from my intuition. But
also, and then just to take it one step further and wrap it up, as producers, we're often in the same situation where, you you know, we have a lot of overlap, but we have a lot of differences. So, you know, if we sit behind the monitor and we, you know, individually, if we were directing, we would do something different, but that doesn't mean we come up and be like, you just can't come up and be like, oh, I would do it this way, because it's not what it is. It's about understanding. It's my job as a producer is to understand what these guys want to do and do everything to help them find that, and vice versa. And so, you know, it's about getting in their mind and knowing what they want, and so then being helpful. So if I see something that I think Josh wants that he's not getting, or Tony wants that he's not getting, then I can say it from that position, but not from my personal position as a director.
Now I'd like to encourage you to step into the discussion. So if there's any question, just give a sign and ask.
I was making some music videos and documentaries, and now I'm preparing my first short movie. And I want to ask you how to deal, if you have some tips. You were a bit talking about it, but if you have some tips, how to deal with disrespect from professionals in the crew. Because I already had to kick out one guy before we started shooting, because I didn't go to film school, but I was working. And I think I have experience from work. And he told me, you didn't learn it, you don't know, and like this. So
are you the director or the producer? You're the director.
I also wrote it.
Yeah, well, congratulations. As a director, I mean, it's unfortunate, but you have to deal with it, especially when you're starting, because you're doing everything. But you always, one piece of advice I received is you always got to be ready to walk away from somebody. Always. And like the second you see a bad sign, you don't have to walk away. You definitely pull them aside and you talk to them in private, away from other crew members, so there's no ego and embarrassing. And you talk to them, and you be as honest as possible, saying, "This is important to me," and you know, any way which way you want to say it. I mean, that's my suggestion, is that you really speak honestly and from your heart. And if they don't respect that, then they need to move. I mean, I would have, from my thing, I would have got rid of him right away.
Yeah, but I also, before you say that, because the fact is, there's times when you assume, you think that someone's being disrespectful, and what you need to figure out is exactly that. In that forum, you take them aside, and this happened to me, and after school, I remember thinking, my cinematographer, who I've worked with many times, I thought he was being disrespectful to me, but it was really just two young people being, you know, inexperienced in some things, and two young people that hadn't had an honest conversation about it, and me saying, "Do you think I'm stupid?" And him saying, "No, I don't think you're stupid. I think you're very smart." And I go, "Then why do you disagree with everything I say?" Because I don't disagree with it. Well, but if you're going to disagree with me, please do it in this way. And, you know, and we'll have a discussion about things, because a lot of it is just, especially early on, you want people to communicate with you in a way that you feel respect, and in front of other people where you don't, because you're all sensitive. So I think it's better, before ever jumping to conclusions about things, always consider that you may be wrong about this and you want to be validated. And if the guy is, or whoever it is disrespectful, then absolutely have no qualm saying goodbye.
Yeah, he's right. I think that I think no matter how big the film you're making is, you have to be surrounded by people who believe in the film you're making. And if you trust that at the core, then you can have disagreements and you can talk it out and you can argue. But if you're not sure that that person has, you know, is making the same film as you or has the same belief that you do, then it can be very toxic.
Anyone would like to ask for advice? Or anything else? Question? Yes, sir. Okay.
I would like to ask you, like, when you were shooting Silent Killer in France, what was like different from your experience shooting in America, and how do you work like communications, like with people, and how did you shout it, like permissions to shoot it on the streets, or did you like make it like more in a public way, or?
No, Well, just in regards to like, just to set up how we did the movie, we had an outline, a pretty detailed outline of like where Antonio wanted to shoot. And a week after Martha, I went down to Paris with the other producer, and I started just making a list every day and figuring out how to achieve those things on the list. And then like I remembered I got invited one time to a festival that I wasn't even attending to meet with the producers union in Paris. And I never responded to the email, but I do remember it. So I went through my email and I found it, and then I contacted the guy who contacted me. I went in, I sat with him, and he told me the person who signs the permits, you know, so I called her directly. And then, so it was just like, you know, and we have so many relations, and so we had permits to shoot. And then we also, you know, Brady, you know, we used every resource we could possibly have, and everybody shared their resources. Brady with the actors and his casting director, and the casting director that he knows introduces the production designer. You know, everybody was involved and passionate about the project. For me, I mean, it was a fun film to make. It was probably one of the most fun. Because Paris is really beautiful, and everybody was really supportive. I think the only thing I could say, I think I've said this before, is I remember getting an email for a friend's movie in New York and asking me to be an extra at an art gallery. And I was just like, oh, I'm not doing that. I love them, but I'm not doing that. And then when I was in Paris, you know, all of our friends in Paris would ask people to be extras, and none of them had that attitude. Like, everybody was like, oh, of course, yeah, we'll help. It's a movie, this is fun. And I just remember, you know, that was the difference for me in my experience. I felt like people are helpful in New York and America, but for some reason, maybe because we were foreign to the situation, but I think it's definitely something that's just in Paris and France and their cinema, you know. But it was a very, it was an extension. I felt like we had new family members in Paris who were also involved in the film, and I mean that's my experience.
Josh, you mentioned that. Is the mic on? Josh, you mentioned that during the Simon Killer preparation or shooting, maybe you got in contact with Michal Haneke and also Gaspar Noé. No.
Gaspar was introduced to us by. Actually, he came to our after party for Martha at Brady's friend's house, and he had offered us some help. And then Jean-Stéphane, who's another filmmaker, has helped us. Lodge Carrigan, who we met through Brady, advised us. Antonio and Brady obviously worked with Michael Haneke, and Brady and Tony were afforded the opportunity to meet with Sam Berger. Is that how I say his name?
Christian
Berger. I'm sorry, I didn't meet him, but he's a cinematographer who they can explain you. People were very helpful. Darius Kanji, who shot like Seven, the movie, the DP of Seven and City of Lost Children. You know, we got to meet a lot of these people through Brady's relationships and generosity. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers it, but you can continue.
So has Christian Berger has any impact on the visual style of the film?
No.
No?
No, I mean, besides the fact he's a brilliant cinematographer. No, I mean, Christian, so we were, Michael was really nice and introduced us to Christian because we were looking at his Cine Reflex system. Do you guys know about Christian Berger's system of lighting? It's like it's a very particular kind of system of lighting that he does, which is interesting, but it's not necessarily easy to use on the go. It basically, he uses mirrors and one light source as a way to light entire spaces, night scenes. I mean, I think it's like a 4K and then multiple mirrors, and mirrors with different sort of patterns and shapes. He shot White Ribbon. He shot Time of the Wolf, right? And
But you went to him. You guys were talking to him because we were shooting with not many lights, and
we went with him to look at the system.
To look at the system, but
yeah.
But you also. I remember you came back with the drawing to show, but the reason that we were exploring this was we were trying to find creative and new ways to make movies that that were more mobile, and especially financial restraints and also just movement through a foreign city.
Sorry. Hi. The reason that we were looking at the system is because you can fit an entire lighting package inside of a minivan. So we wanted to be that mobile because we couldn't afford to have trucks on the film. We couldn't afford to not so much financially, but more because of time. How quickly
but the problem with the system ultimately for us was anything. Because here we'd be fine, right? Because we're on the ground level. But when you're dealing with Paris and you're dealing with fourth floor apartments, the only way to use that system is to literally build a scaffolding or a crane outside your window.
Right.
So, but ultimately, we realized we didn't need it shooting on the Alexa because we could be very clever with practical lights and a minimum amount of movie lights. And get the image we wanted.
The other thing is that it's an incredible system, but it's brand new, and so none of us really knew how to use it yet.
Yeah.
We would have to go and spend some time with Christian in Vienna.
There's a video online on YouTube called
CSLR reflective lighting system.
Yeah. CSLR, CSLR, and look it up on YouTube just because it is a fascinating system, and because he wants people to use it more. Young filmmakers, he's excited about young filmmakers using it. So look into the system.
Absolutely. I mean, at one point he said that he would give us the system if we wanted to use it. That he would give it to us for free.
What did his pipe say? He smoked a pipe. And it said something like perfection on it. I mean, it was so intimidating. He just sat back and puffed on this pipe.
Yeah, he's a pretty
distinguished gentleman. Wife is the girl from Pickpocket.
That's true. Yeah.
His wife is the girl from Pickpocket.
She was Bresson's actress, muse on a couple movies actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's worth looking at. I mean, I actually want to look at it again or revisit looking at it on the film that I'm making. But it's yeah, look it up.
Next question, please.
You talked a lot about the collaborative process of filmmaking, but then you also talked about how you couldn't say your opinion if you're the intern. So where's the line?
That's different, though. That's different because.
No, go ahead. I'm the intern right now. I'm not talking.
It's different. The role that you take on a film means something. The role in an office, has some sort of bearing, and you're.
So, but maybe I'd be clear. The intern that's working with us definitely doesn't keep his opinion to himself. I actually quite respect his opinion. He's read my script and he's told me about books that I'm reading. He's told me the history behind things. He's introduced me to other books. He's told me things that he learned as a writer. I just feel like it's navigating a relationship just like a friendship. It's like, I'm not going to tell you all my secrets the first day I meet you. I'm not going to share with you because I don't know you yet. So it's like you're coming into my something that's mine. It's very important to me. It's like until you know the world and what's going on, you have a full. You don't just jump in and give your opinion because I've been thinking about it longer than you have, and you're just seeing if our relationship works out. When we start dating, yeah, totally, and that's the thing. It's like, no, but that's a joke, but it's like, but the point is that like I want to be clear, like the people that stick around are people whose opinions we want and who we welcome and who are helpful. So in the beginning as an intern, you just have to suss out if you want to still be there. But if you're going to be there, just be helpful. So, so basically, I don't want to contradict what we were saying because it's not true. If anything, we are collaborative with the people that work with us from any position. You know what I mean? So sorry, I'll just clear that up.
Well, what I was going to say was that there's a difference between being collaborative and collaborative ultimately implies a certain kind of comfort level, right? There's nothing about filmmaking really that is too mysterious. There's definitely a part of it that is, but it's instinctual, and it's human, and it's all about connecting with human beings in a room. It's about speaking to people in a way that you know. That's, I mean, there's different schools of thought. Some people like being a dictator about directing, and I don't think any one of us think that way. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most important voice in the room. And what I said about being an intern and being quiet, that's really about listening. You don't know everything right away. And one of the worst things when like, it's not a bad thing, but I remember being a film student, and I've gone back to film schools to the sophomore and freshman year, and I've talked to film students, and I find them to be incredibly arrogant and presumptuous about things. And I remember I was like that. But it's because you're so passionate about it, you think you know everything, but you don't. You don't know everything because you haven't done enough, and you haven't listened enough. And so I think it's really about, it's just like any relationship, like Josh said, you listen, and you know when you've reached a certain point in any relationship to start going down a certain road or talking about certain things, and it's just like that. But, you know, don't always assume the person that you're listening to or around doesn't know what they're talking about. You just may not understand it yet. I think it's just all a matter of just, you know, just if you go into this thing of making movies, ultimately just try and think I always try to think about making movies in a very practical way, in a pragmatic way. There is something that's inherently you that should come out in your work, and that's what makes it you and makes your work special. But the process of making a movie, the technical aspects of making a movie, the way the systems work, those things follow a certain logic that you can learn just by being around, listening, and doing it a few times. And you'll get better as you go along, and your instincts will get sharper, and you'll be quicker. But yeah, I think going back, it is an ultimately collaborative process, and that's what you have to do. You just have to learn in any part of the collaborative process, wherever role you're in, when to speak and when not to speak.
There's another question somewhere here. Yeah, go on.
First of all, thank you for sharing your experience. It's been very helpful and inspiring so far. And the second question is related to the top Searchlight. I would like to ask if, you know, kind of, they seem like the good guys in the film industry. So are they helpful, or are they just using the independent filmmakers?
No, absolutely not. I don't even know how that would really happen. You know, I think there's talked about this a little bit this week. I think there's this idea that there's independent and there's Hollywood, and that they're these two really separate things. And if you go to Hollywood, you're turning your back on independent, and that's all nonsense, really. It's like, as a filmmaker, you want to find collaborators who understand what you want to do and want to help you do the best work you can do. And everything with Searchlight so far is just, what's the movie, you know, what's the movie we want to make, and how can we shape that? You know, how can we help that? And I think that like any collaborator, whether you're, there's some directors that have relationships with major studios that understand what they want to do, and they still make the movies they want to make. They're just $100 million movies, but they're still what the director wants to make, and that relationship with the studio allows for that. Or there's independents that make small budgets, and you get to make the film you want to make. But then there's also this weird middle ground, which is large independent films where directors have full control, and they end up making crap because they don't have people asking them questions. Like I actually think the role of executives can be very, very valuable in continually asking questions to the director to say, and anytime someone asks you questions or challenges you, it forces you to think more and articulate, if you need to, why you want to do things the way you do. And I think the worst part of filmmaking can be, yes, on the extreme side, when studio executives get in and stop a film from being made, but being made the way it should be. But I think equally as bad as that is when a director has no one around him asking him questions, and he goes off on some self-indulgent journey. But the result of both of those things is not good filmmaking.
I would also add that that you, as a filmmaker, should never. I think the exploitative aspect of what you're talking about is not when an independent filmmaker works with an independent studio like Fox, or it's more like when a big studio has a project and they know they can get this director for cheap and that they can control that director. And I would say that no filmmaker should ever go into a studio project until they've developed their voice enough and developed that confidence enough in their voice. Because it's very easy in that world, if you haven't, to be exploited and also just controlled yes. And say yes. And then it's really sad, because then you really don't know who you are anymore. And it's you see it happen, and it's independent is not necessarily a financial thing. It's more of a state of mind, or the way that you think about making movies. And I think Paul Thomas Anderson is an independent filmmaker, and I think Tarantino's an independent filmmaker, and Soderbergh's an independent filmmaker, and David Fincher. These guys are independent filmmakers. Steven Spielberg, independent filmmaker. He makes the movies he wants to make. It's about making the movie you want to make. And if that costs $50 million and someone's willing to give you $50 million to do that, or $100 million, then that's great. And I think it's. But I always caution against anybody going into a world like a studio world without having had experience before. And you can get that experience really easily on commercial sets. You start seeing what that's like on a commercial set, and just imagine a commercial set, but longer and even more voices to deal with.
Any more questions?
I'm curious about the creative element that goes into making all the marketing aspects. The creative element that goes into, like Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene was picked up at Sundance. I think he had a good 5-6 months, if I remember correctly, to produce the product. He had a really cool creative campaign, posters, trailer, teaser. Same goes for you, for Simon Killer. You had a little bit of time there to think about how you wanted to pitch Simon Killer to a larger public. Maybe you can go into that detail, that creative element.
Ultimately, when you hand your film over to a distributor, you hope that you're going to be involved in publicity and marketing. They don't have to involve you. Luckily with Martha, they did completely involve us, and it was just a lot of back and forth. It's their team coming to us with ideas, and just starting with imagery and trailers, and just it's just us like pushing, saying, okay, we like this about it, we don't like this about it, and it's actually an interesting part of the process to navigate, because you do have to find ways to focus, Because if they send you something and you just say, oh, this is crap, like, what are you doing? Then they shut off and they say, oh, we don't need to involve you. We're going to do what we want to do. But you have to find ways to say, talk about it in the right way, where you're saying, oh, okay, well, I really like this, this, and this, but I feel this, this, and this. Can we try this? And it's about getting that dialogue in the right place where you are collaborating. They don't have to collaborate, but you can create a really good collaboration. And with Martha, it's a really good example of where we got to with that stuff.
The other thing with Fox was that, like, they're really great because I didn't understand how it all worked. So I spent like 2 weeks there, a week and a half in their offices, like hanging out with the publicity people, just getting to know each other. And then they would explain to me everything that they were doing and show me all their documents and how this works. And so after we left Martha, it allowed me to basically know more about what distributors do. And Fox Searchlight was super welcoming and just letting me see everything and understand it, because it's a machine, but it's a well-oiled machine, and I didn't know how it was like what they did, like we had no idea. Yeah. And I just a testament to them, like they were quite welcoming and open about it, and I'm still friends with all these. We all are. I mean, everybody in each department, I think, is really cool, and I think that helps. And then there's Simon, which, I don't know, the poster was done...
Poster was Brandon Schaefer.
Yeah.
They said, they asked if we had anybody we wanted to work with, and then they sent some options. And then I talked to 2 guys. Brandon Schaefer was one of them. And that was it. I mean, and then they send you options, and IFC's obviously more... It's a different audience than Fox, so they're thinking about things differently. But at the same time, it's still the same principles of how they're going to approach marketing. And then the same person who cut Martha trailer cut Simon trailer, and again, it was just you cringe. You always cringe, because what we've found is that for the most part, and the studios, even IFC, they know they're going way too commercial with the way they start off the marketing campaign, but that's where they want to start. And then it's your job as a filmmaker to respectfully inject yourself and your vision and get to some sort of middle ground. And it doesn't have to be a compromise. Ultimately, it can actually be better than what either side had imagined it would be. And I think with Martha, that was the case. And I think with Simon, even After School's trailer was like, I mean, After School, which I don't know how many of you saw it, is not necessarily like the most marketable thriller, but the way that IFC cut the trailer first, and they know this was bad, but they always show you the worst, sort of most intense version. It was like, in a world... Robert was a student in it's like that sort of like menacing voiceover, and then we took that out, and we found pieces of dialogue in the film that did what they were trying to do with voiceover. So it's a compromise, and it's a process, and you ultimately can land on something better than what either one expected.
With After School, we didn't have that like much. There's not ever really much money for the movies that we do for marketing. So, like, you have to fight for what you want. And Antonio, during the time that we released After School, the economy in America was really bad, and the film had tons of accolades and a lot of critics behind it, but it still took a while to get IFC to buy it, like a year and a half after all these things. And we just kept fighting for it, and then we fought for one theater in New York that was on the block where Antonio's parents and him lived at the time. And you have to be creative about it. So Antonio left his phone number in where you buy your tickets, so that if people wanted to talk to him, they could call him and he would get coffee because he's right down the block. And so he would do stuff like that. And then, one night we had a journalist who loved the movie and a journalist who hated the movie come and talk about it after the screening. Ted Hope came and talked to Tony. Nicole Cassell, all these Michael Lehman, who directed Heathers. All these people that we have met along the way through whatever we can do. We just would. Remember when I said before, like you should never have nothing. You should never not be doing something. You always have something to do. In these other kind of films, you have to be creative because there's no money, especially when you're trying out with your first films. So I don't know. I thought maybe I brought that up because I thought it was.
Yeah, I think the thing to think about is always how to be creative and how to reach people, and that's not always how a studio thinks, and doesn't always work out. But I do think that that fundamentally, if you can figure out a way of like connecting with people one-on-one or with an audience in a direct way, then it's the best. And I still think that I could do that again and just put my cell phone out there and have people buy me coffee. I mean, I get coffee. People would think it was a joke that my cell phone was on the window, but the best was when Dean took me to Dean, who eventually interned for us and then is now editor and edited the short film. Yeah, the guy who edited the short film that's here for Josh, he was an NYU student that called me and said, "Hey, is this really you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he took me to coffee, and then he told me what he didn't like about the movie. Like he said, and he told me, he's like, "Yeah, I didn't really like it that much." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And then, but at the very least, he bought the coffee, that was the best thing. But he stayed in touch. But I respected the fact that he had an opinion about this. But yeah, it was the most rewarding part of sort of like putting that film out, was that little thing that I tried to do.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing all these experiences with us. Thank you for coming to
Thank you,
Karlovy Vary
guys.
Film Festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.